More of his work and hear more about it directly from him. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much, and particularly to all the people, my assistant, Elsa Hoffman, who you all got to know, and also all of the people that are sitting here that helped us, and great deal of appreciation. I wanted to talk a few minutes first about my work, and then I'll show you some images kind of to back up that kind of palaver. My son Sam, he's in college now, but when he was a child, he had a kid's book about 3 bears that encountered urban sprawl. Now these bears, they go over a hill near their house one morning, and you look down, and somebody's built a shopping center overnight. Well, already, people are hustling and bustling up and down the sidewalk, and they all look so satisfied. The little bears, they're not sure they're happy anymore. And somewhere they find people clothes. In the next sequence of pictures, you see these little pint-sized figures moving amongst the legs of all the other passers-by. And the caption reads, well, now that they're like everybody else, are they really happy? Well, no, not really, because underneath their people clothes still beat their furry little animal hearts. Well, a big wind comes up, and it blows and it blows, blows men's ties out, women's skirts up, and one big gust blows all the little bears' clothes off. And for the first time, they realize who and what they are. Man, they go tearing back across the parking lot, back to a place they could just be themselves. And it wasn't so many years ago as a crow flies that I was getting ready for work. I start down my walkway, I had a briefcase and suit and tie on, and all of a sudden a big wind comes up, and it blows and it blows, and the first gust blows my briefcase down the street. The second blows off my coat and tie. The third blows everything else away. As I'm standing there completely amazed at this unlikely turbulence in my life, the only thing I can feel under those people clothes is this thudding of an animal heart. And I have flashbacks to all the times in my life that all I could think about was giving up my regular life, going off into the distance, maybe into the wilderness, and building a small house or a cabin and living in a more essential way. Well, it was a time of change for me, and I found myself at the how-to section of the library. I see things like load bearing and R factor and coefficient. I said, you know, maybe building a cabin, even a small one, is a whole lot harder than I thought. Luckily for me, as I start back across the library, I happened to stumble on a stack of National Geographics. And maybe the first one I picked up was about the story about the barrios in Rio de Janeiro, in which a whole percentage of the population, the disenfranchised, have to go out into the highways and byways and pick up the cast-offs, the dendritis of urban life, and take that material somewhere and build them a place to live. I said, well, I know I'm not supposed to like this because these are really poor people. And yet they've done an amazing job with the materials that they had at hand. And in my mind, it constituted a kind of raw aesthetic. Or maybe it was an article about a tribe in the Amazon basin who had to go into the jungle, forage whatever was there to build the things they needed. So I know these huts don't have any running water or electricity, but they're beautiful. And they fit so well back into the environment from which the material was drawn. Or maybe it was a bird from Africa that had done an amazing engineering feat. I said, I know these birds are not smart enough to do this, but in human terms, this would be amazing craftsmanship. Well, you know, it was then I realized that maybe I wasn't a normal builder. Maybe I was some kind of an inspiration builder, some kind of strange builder. And I did get started on that house, and I learned some things while building it that really stood me in good stead in my art life. Maybe the first is the simplest. It's learning to accept what you do, your progress. To be fair to myself, I decided even before I began this project that I was going to do the very best job I could do. At the end of the day, I was going to accept my progress, and the next day I was going to build on it. The second thing is if you use non-standard materials like so many sculptors do, you can't always go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy the things you need. And similarly, if you decide to cut a big tree down and use it as the mainstay of your house, how do you know it would work, and who would you ask? Well, I played a game with myself I call giving it my one best shot. And I said, if I'm the last person left on earth and there's nobody else to ask, what do I think? Do I think it's strong enough? And somewhere along there, I began accepting responsibility for the kinds of things that I designed and made. The third thing is that working day in and day out in a very unself-conscious way, I began to see what I liked and what I didn't like. I saw how important personal preference is in making those decisions. And over a period of time, I began to develop my own sense of personal aesthetic. And finally, I saw how important need is in getting anything done. I really needed this house, so I was able to coalesce my best energies and direct my best problem-solving skills. And sometimes when I have a friend who's a sculptor maybe and not doing that well with their work, I'll say, hey, you have to figure out how to knead. Well, I didn't know it was getting out of hand, but my neighbors did. They were always coming down to my house and kicking the dirt and scratching their head. And once my friend Brooks brought a relative from another area of the country, he said, I like what you're doing here. You're a real artist. Well, maybe for all of you, that would be a great thing for somebody to say to you, but I felt like it was the end of the earth, and I wanted him to take it back. And you know, upon reflection, I realized that as a child, I thought being an artist was the greatest thing you could be. The only trouble, it seemed to come with this tremendous sense of social responsibility. You were supposed to do something great, something earth-shaking, something that saved people. And it was connected with that onerous word, talent. So I knew what that word, art and talent, had to do with Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. I just couldn't figure out what it had to do with me or anything I was doing at my house. So one morning, as if by magic, I found myself enrolling in the nearest art department and taking sculpture courses and art history. And you know, for me, that minute, that day, was the best day of my life, because I didn't know there was anybody else like me. I didn't know there were lots of people that liked handling materials, that liked seeing their ideas get worked out in 3 dimensions. The only trouble was I was kind of an art nerd, and I'd go around and I'd say, is this art? Is this art? How come this person gets to paint this board blue and call it art? Well, it wasn't long before one of my professors grabbed me by the throat. He started choking me to death, and he said, who in the hell cares if it's art or not? Why don't you just go in there, make whatever you're going to make? Who's going to know the difference in 20 years anyway? And you know, I needed that permission given. And I learned some things while I was in school that I think helped towards my continuation towards being a working artist. And maybe the first is the importance of a role model. Because I didn't know if you had to have a psychiatrist standing by when you made your first piece, whether you had to have a family upheaval, or whether you had to go to a major city and work as a waiter in order to qualify. And it wasn't until I saw these pretty normal people who were intensely interested in making things, making sculpture, that I realized there was going to be some hope for me. The second thing is that it's hard to be a food faddist unless there are other people around you who eat beans and rice. And similarly, it's hard to be a working artist unless there are other people around who understand what you're going through. I would say my biggest challenge as a working artist is to maintain a sense of personal equilibrium in a world that gives high marks to culture but really ignores individual makers. And it's easy to have an identity crisis at any time in your career in which you walk into your studio and for 1 minute you can't remember who made it to work. And then you're glad that there's a university art department around, or you have somebody like Elsa and you can call her and say, are you still working? And when they say, yeah, I'm working, somehow you're relieved, you're able to go back and do your own work. The third thing, I realized that there was a big difference between doers and viewers, between people who make things and people who look at things seriously. To me, it looked like 2 different jobs. Museum directors, curators, gallery owners, you know, their job is to decide what art object might be more inherently interesting than another, or where something fits in the lifeline of art. You know, that's not my job. I have to be true to my materials. And a lot of times when I'm starting to work on something, I really don't know what I'm doing. And if at that point I had to decide whether it was art historically significant or whether it was great, you know, I'd never get going. And finally, I had to deal with that word talent. And I decided, though, although talent isn't irrelevant, it's just not the issue. I had the right to make what I wanted as much as I wanted. Basically, I could do as much work as I could afford. Well, at one shimmering moment, I decided I was going to quit school, go home, build a studio, and get to work. And you know, it's one thing to know you have a right to do something. It's another thing to know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And luckily for me, I kept up with the university. I went to see a lecture by a woman named Marty Zelt, who had been a seamstress in her life before sculpture, and she brought Velcro fasteners, zippers, and cloth to her work. As I'm leaving that lecture, I'm saying, I wonder what I already know. I wonder what simple technology or some simple method of joining that I might already be familiar with. And driving home, I'm noticing, you know, along the roadways of North Carolina, the maintenance crews striving to keep the brush down alongside of the road, you know. That was like Paul being struck off his horse on the way to Damascus. I have an epiphysis, and I said, hey, maybe I could use those. Well, it wasn't so unusual that a woodsman like myself would see the potential of the saplings along his driveway because they're plentiful, they're renewable, and it's just like having a giant warehouse of materials always at your fingertips. And after working with this material for a while, I realized that I had a deeper resonance with it. I'd grown up in the woodlands of North Carolina. We have lots of underbrush and intersecting lines. And as some kids laid in fields and looked at the architectural details of clouds, I found myself looking at the drawing quality of the winter landscape, all those hatch marks. So when I turned to sculpture, it seemed easy to co-opt the forces of nature and play that natural drawing style out onto the surfaces of these large works. Before I could begin, I had to figure out what birds and beavers and other natural shelter builders already know. And that is that if you drag a stick through the woods, you see what I mean. It's got an infuriating tendency to tangle with everything. That's really the simplest method of joining. If you flex a stick and pull it through a matrix and let it go, it'll snap back and hold itself in place. That's the how, but the what. If you had seen me at the time, you might have had pity on me. I could spend maybe 5 minutes in a museum before getting sweaty palms and running down the steps and going, you know, they've used all the good ideas up. Or you would look in an art magazine and you could, you know, you'd have thought palpitation. They've exploited every material. And then you find that in the last census, over 1 million people alone in New York City claim to be visual artists. You say, whoa, there's too many of us. But after worrying about this for a while, I realized that I love to make things, and the art world was just going to have to lump it. You know, before I go on, I would say two things. One about the art world in general, and the other about creativity. You know, for me, the art world is not a wall. It's a group of jobs, loosely knit jobs, filled with good people, people like you and I. Those people don't tell artists what they have to do. The artists have to decide what they want to do. There's not one person that hasn't been imagined themselves being taken in a fiery chariot to a major city where they and their work gets what it deserves. But we all want different things. Some people want a certain kind of car. They want to live in a certain community. They want a certain number of children. And it's all these real world choices that help, you know, decide what opportunities you allow yourself to be available to. So one thing, I arrived at a place with a pair of clippers, and 3 weeks later, I have to have a good piece. And so I've had a few reflections about creativity. And I'd say the first is that hysteria rides on the shoulder of every creative person. And so if you want to go somewhere and get going immediately, you have to figure out how to redirect your hysterical energy. The second thing is that I have different states of being. I have a state of being in which I do my laundry and eat my dinner, and another state, a door behind which all my problem-solving skills lay. And, you know, the thing is, how do you go over and open that door? If I happen to be home in my community on a Friday night and all my friends come over and we start laughing and having a good time, the cares of the week drop away. You say, wonder why we're not on a national talk show or something. And, you know, what it makes me realize is the best state for making is one in which you feel unself-conscious but fully yourself. That's the state of making I seek. It's not about wringing your hands or feeling upset. It's more a feeling about being with your friends. You know, one of the unique things about my work is that the work is done in public. There's no studio doors to close. There's no place to hide. The work is done in full public view. And you know, for some artists this would be consternating, but I consider it a kind of cultural exchange, one in which the energy of that place and those people is kind of folded back into the sculpture itself. You know, when I'm on site, I like representing making in a positive way. I like interceding for the arts. I like demystifying the process. But mainly, I like reminding people that artists are just normal people who are looking for their rightful place in the world of work. So I would like to show you a few images of my work and talk a little bit about it. This is my house in North Carolina. If you're an owner builder, what you, the mistakes you made early on, you call quaint later. So I've had quite a few quaint moments, and I've learned how to build log cabins a little better than I started. This is the backside. I've got a porch on there now, but I dug all these stones in my backyard. I had a hidden mine. I really didn't realize they were under there, but we unearthed the things, and we had lots of rock. I put all the good rocks on the inside, all the poor stones on the outside, and so sequencing is one of the things we do with our material all the time. In other words, if we have the worst sticks go underneath where you can't see them, and the best sticks go on top. I had lots of gathering in my own woods where I use these cedars that are split out as part of the ceiling, and of course that you don't really have a painting situation. So your house is, you know, a lot of people have more than one house in them. I just had one house and a lot of sculptures. So I started out by building various kinds of sheds for myself and for my neighbors, and I built a rock monument to myself because I didn't think anybody else would. So this was parked out in my yard until my neighbor hit it with his logging truck, and now I have another garden with a garden wall. But anyway, I always say that, I'm sorry, I lost that one. This is, when I first started making things, I made these pieces, and I called them waiting it out in maple. And because my neighbors were always saying when their kids went to college, things were going to change. And so I had a lot of images of my neighbors sitting out in front of my house. And eventually, sorry. But I have these pictures in here about materials. And this is maple. It's outside my studio. A lot of times when you look at the work, you see these really long lines, but a lot of the material we're using is really short. And maple is one of my favorites. My friend Scott were carrying these materials into a gallery. And you know, it's an addition-subtraction process where you're taking from your stack and building the work. This was a work in Indianapolis at the Heron School of Art, and a lot of times this was a expansion of a golf course for the city, and so they were willing to allow us to come in and take this maple out and to use it. So we're constantly looking for sites, but I try to look, you know, for sites that are about to be destroyed. Often I'm just 1 minute before the bulldozer gets there. This was out in Wyoming, and someone had the thought that if they cleaned the willow out of their ponds, there would be less willow, and there was just about 1,000 times more willow, so I was the beneficiary of this. And this is in Hawaii, where we're gathering on the edges of a volcano. We have strawberry guava we're gathering there, and eucalyptus, and got a coffee tree and some other things that we're getting. And in Ireland, we gathered at a willow farm where they're using it for biomass. The energy companies haven't been that forthright in coming forth to buy this material, but a lot of farmers started into raising willow, hoping they could sell it. This is a piece at in Richmond, Virginia, at the Botanic Garden, and I just wanted to show you this because oftentimes we accept these sticks with leaves on them if we're working in the summer. We have the drudgery of taking the leaves off. But this is a piece we built. It's called Diamonds in the Rough. And there are 11 little cabanas that sit together with some spaces in between where it's not a complete grid of diamonds and reflects this building that's not too far behind it. I just want to show you this. This is a bit about materials. This is from start to finish. This is a willow farm in Ireland, and willows were raised early on in the Middle Ages and before for every conceivable thing from, wattle and daub to making coracles to fencing and all kinds of stuff. This is a piece that, these longer pieces, the people that helped me here will realize when we were out cutting, we cut the structural pieces and then we all cut lots of other sizes. But this is Talent Community Art Center, and it's outside of Dublin. And because there's a lot of crime there, they wanted me to work behind this fence, but I was convinced that we should do a piece that the public could see. So we capitalized on this tree that was outside the Art Center and decided to build an Irish round tower. And they're a tower that's prevalent in Ireland. Monks from the 8th to the 10th century built these enigmatic pieces of towers. And so this was my tower of Tala that uses a central structure of the tree to hold it up. Actually, all the living limbs of this tree are sticking outside of the tower. This was 2 years later, just before the piece had to come down. And so there was quite a lot of climbing nonetheless. Just to show you another, I don't know if we can go back on this machine here. This is a piece from start to finish in New York. And I just keep touching the thing. And there again, we have to, at Cornell, we have to always haul the materials. These were our structural pieces. And what we were doing is building a companion piece for each one of these trees. There are locust trees, and you can see we've marked out electric, water, gas underneath there. They're going to allow me to drill into this plaza because they're going to replace some of the blocks anyway. So I always make a kind of a bit of a drawing or some kind of game plan for working on the piece, but oftentimes as things proceed, just throw the plan over your shoulder and start reacting to the materials and what you end up having. We draw the piece out on the ground, try to find a footprint for it. The dots are where we're going to drill some holes. And so we put our uprights in like we did here in front. There's kind of bigger sticks around the whole perimeter of the piece. And then you can't let your finger linger, I'll say that. We try to pull the shape we want using string, and as things proceed, we're able to cut the piece loose and it holds the shape. Here is a bit taller than what we've been using in our piece out here, but ultimately this is the work. It's 7 of these big pieces on this plaza. This was at the opening. I wanted to show you how my work proceeds, my process. And this was a piece at the Savannah College of Art and Design. I was able to use this, the old county jail that's been given over to the college to become a library eventually. They tore the roof off, and that's as far as they got. But anyway, I was able to weave into the jail bars. I thought because of thematically that it was a jail that I'd have some escape hatches or a magic carpet of some sort. So this is the way I work. I work structurally first, and so you can see that I'm putting these big, really big pieces. It doesn't look that big, but most of these scrim pieces are maybe 3 or 4 inches at the base and maybe 20 or 25 feet long, and I'm weaving a kind of a scrim over the jail bars and over the front of the building. And so it's like making a canvas and then drawing on it. So then the second thing, as I get a structural base that's strong enough to hold sticks on it, I applicate a kind of aesthetic on it. So that the second phase is kind of an aesthetic phase of putting sticks where you think they look good. And finally, there's the cosmetic phase, and that is going in and erasing things you don't like by putting little nondescript sticks over them. And so I just happened to find these beautiful white sticks along the railroad siding in Savannah, so I went over there and gathered a few of those. And and it really helped to make the piece look great. I wanted to talk about my work in terms of temporary, because I do temporary work. This was a pink and white dogwood that I bent down a little at a time, so that I ultimately it bloomed out with flowers and finally with leaves. And we knew that it, had about 3 months that it could work without hurting the tree. So at that point, we took it down like all of the pieces. You can see that it's quite structural. We pulled it, and we're about to pull it down the street behind a car to the dump. So, there's always the fate of these beautiful pieces. They're tentative, they're ephemeral, and they finally have a certain life. This was a piece at Swarthmore College called Abracadabra. This piece, we knew the tree was going to come down at the end of 2 years, and so they were willing to let me use it. Luckily for me, it had a very strong vertical, and I was able to put the stacking motion next to it, and I think made a really good looking piece. This is its winter configuration. It's about 50 feet tall, so if you take on a tree as a site, sometimes you have to scare yourself to death in order to build the thing, so it doesn't look like you were afraid to get up and complete the task. This allowed for some really great takedown shots at the 2-year mark. Had a tree surgeons come and take the tree down and the sculpture. This is a piece in Denmark at Krakamaka. It's a park, a nature park, and you have to find the materials for your sculpture within the park itself. This is little big man. He's when he thinks about nature, he seeks his own reflection. And so you can go up inside the body. It's sprung on these trees that are basically dead trees out there. And so this was its winter configuration. I was really lucky because it flooded in the wintertime and gave a more mythic feeling to the piece. And then this is 2 years later. My parents-in-law have family in Denmark and Norway, so they went and visited and saw the old hero falling face forward on the ground. This was a piece at Michigan, and every culture has built face jugs, and so this was my attempt to make face jugs. The Romans made them, and the potters in North Carolina made them. So these things face a big glass wall, so you look at the sculptures, they look back at you. And but at a point about 3 years into their life, a big 4-foot snow came careening down the roof and knocked them over, left these poor things screaming. Excuse me. This is help me. This is a piece of, and it was an attempt to give a little longevity to the work. Living plants were bare-rooted into the mix before we actually built the piece. This is after Monte's Tempietto in Rome, and so with its proportions. And so this was like 5 years later, and this was 7 years later, and now there's just a little group of trees that sit in that place, the kind of memento of the previous sculpture. I want to talk about my work in terms of drawing, because everything you can do with a pencil, you do with a stick. In other words, when you hit a piece of paper with a pencil, you make a tapered line, you hit it with one weight and finish off with another. And the great thing for me is that sticks are tapered, so if I organize the tapers in one direction, it gives a sense of implied motion. So that's what's going on here. This is about the closest thing I have to a permanent piece. It's in the North Carolina Museum. It's about 70 feet long and 16 feet high. So we were able to work along this wall and to make this piece. This was our beginning phase, and just like with your making a drawing, you have emphasis lines. You have some lines kind of disappearing out into the atmosphere, and so that's, if you just think about it in terms of a drawing and how you're going to emphasize this and elucidate a surface, then it starts to look pretty good. This was at the Kohler Art Center in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. These pieces are woven into the superstructure of the building. You can just go over and touch them a little bit and they shake. The piece I like so much because it's a willow and a red twig dogwood, and if you bring a red twig dogwood into the house in the middle of the winter, it will stay absolutely red. If you leave it outside, it turns black. So we were able to use its best time of year to build these pieces. But I really like the way that not only hang from the ceiling so tentatively, but that they constitute a beautiful drawing. This is another kind of drawing about skywriting. This was in Denmark in a group of poplar trees along the North Sea. So we were able to get some scaffolding, go across the road, gather the material, and then immediately come over and work on it. And people getting off the ferry, they turn the corner and they see this enigma. They're not really sure what the thing is. This was kind of big city calligraphy. This was in the World Trade Center. And if you deal with the Port Authority, they say, oh yeah, you can use sticks as long as they don't touch the floors, the walls, or the ceiling. And so, you need a good starting point. So I saw the electricians were using wooden ladders, and so I went down to Putnam Ladder Company and I begged about a bunch of ladders. And one of the great things about working on site is that you can adjust the scale as you build it. So this is a 10,000 square foot lobby. You just kept going and getting more ladders. Because everything looks so insignificant. This is at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., where I'm using small sticks and contrasting that kind of drawing with kind of architecture as drawn surface, or a drawn architectural line. I'm actually up on top of the building outside looking through this big oculus, this big window on top of the building in Lightwell. And so that's 3 floors of sticks, and it's about 16 feet across in the interior, and I'm able to use a platform lift and go up and down and within this circle. So I'm often interested and capable of working on a piece while everybody just uses the space as they normally would. In other words, we couldn't close the stairway. We simply had to have a spotter on the stairs. People came up, we talked to them. We heard their confessions, and right inside there, if you wanted to tell somebody something you didn't want anybody else to know, I was there. Another thing, this was at the American Craft Museum in its old location, not the new building, and there again capitalizing on some of the architectural lines to contrast small sticks and small swirls with the kind of large architectural mark. I use people to help me in my work. This is a piece in France, and what I learned to do early on is partner with organizations and use their goodwill and their influence in the community to get the things that we needed. For example, finding sticks. And so initially my volunteers were just interested in helping gather, but there are a lot of closet stick gatherers out there, so it didn't take that long before they said, we're gathering, how come we can't help you work on it? And so along I got really used to having people help me, and it's really made the work better, and it's also made me capable of making that larger work. And so, sometimes people will say, well, how do they know what to do? And I said, well, we all know about sticks. For us as children, sticks were an imaginative object. It's a weapon, a tool, a piece of wall. It was everything you needed. And so, I call back on everybody's knowledge of sticks, and it's not but just a few seconds before everyone's fitfully working, and on the sticks. This was a piece, you could see I had too many bottles of Bordeaux, and so that became my theme in this piece in France, where there's a number of restaurants around this little lake, and everybody came for a bottle and a glass of wine for lunch. And so that's and this was its kind of foggy morning look. This in Middlebury and in Vermont, and I like this piece very much. But what I really wanted to show you is how many people came to help me work. And we had a lot of these folks help do the terrible job of stripping leaves. And this wasn't everybody. There was some serious class involvement too, but this was the majority of my main workers. And here again, when you saw diamonds in the rough, this is the number of people that got out and helped me work. You can see my hair looks a whole lot like the sculpture up there. I don't know why I can't keep it combed, but it's really hard when your sticks are pulling at you the whole time. This was up in Wisconsin in Stevens Point, where this class, you see I have a coat on it because it was freezing cold. It was below freezing most days, and we still built this thing called the Garden Curiosity. This is a normal day for me at the office. This is on the campus of the University of Michigan, and so people just stand around, they talk to you, they give you advice, they tell you what it is. Oftentimes, they live vicariously through you, so they'll come up about the third week and say, "Don't ruin it." It started to look better yesterday, and so you get advice. But I have to always say that there's one situation that occurs every time, and that a couple will walk up, and while the man surreptitiously tries to push the sculpture over with his shoulder, the wife will say, "Honey, we could live here." And he'll say, "No, we cannot." He'll say, "No, we cannot live here." And what I think that I come to see what they mean is that she hopes that, that they could, for a moment, be divested of all their worldly possessions and just go back and for 1 minute breathe with the animals. Go across the forest curtain. Just be out there. A kind of return to the Garden of Eden. And sometimes we just have impromptu openings, and we pull the scaffolding back from this piece, and people just flooded over there. I mean, there were people get up from the barbershop half shaved and run across the street. People stopped their car in the middle of the road, and we had an impromptu opening. People just came out in New Harmony, Indiana, it was, and took a look. And this is Ireland, where kids come to see in the rain, and it's just a complete rainstorm, and people are out there talking to you. And in Chicago, had some interested visitors that came and looked at the piece I was working on there. I wanted to talk about my work briefly in 3 ways. One is I've worked with architecture, contrasting contemporary architecture with ancient ways of working. This was at the De Cordova in Lincoln, Mass, and the idea was that it was maybe a haystack or a serf's hut. I mean, a tower falling back to a serf's hut or a haystack. And, they weren't interested in me getting up and knocking tiles off their roof, so I decided I would build a mock-up of it and take a crane and just drop it like a dunce cap on the roof. The only trouble was that when you looked up, it looked more like a squirrel's nest than anything else, so I wanted to really reinvigorate the surface, so we got this bucket truck. I got up there and put some heavier lines, and so there's always fear involved, but when you're intense about the sticks, it's not long before you say, "I'm just going to get outside this cage. Would you mind holding my belt?" And you just pinch yourself on the sculpture and start working 70 feet up. And so you can see I did, in fact, put some heavier lines up there. It made it look a little bit better. And this was in Hollywood, Florida, at the Hollywood Art and Culture Center. So kind of the attack of the insect world onto a Floridian house. And I always try to respect how people get in and out of their buildings so that they can continue to use the space. Another piece that uses architecture is this piece out in Hollywood, California, at Max Azriel. So this was my rendition of giving the store a case of the paisley cloth, and so it was a total showstopper. People stopped dead in the street time after time to take a look at this building. I also worked with trees and used those as a foil and put limbs back on them. And this was in Japan. This is a tree is 400 years old, and it was planted the day this little temple was built, which I was staying in, and they allowed me to gather bamboo and reeds and build this piece. and it's called Holy Rope because a lot of the sacred trees in Japan have a rice rope that's put around them in a kind of cornucopia shape. And so mine was that way too. And these were some friends, children that came to visit me. It's quite a jump to get up in there, but you could get up and walk up inside this. And so it was built into this big bamboo patch. Again, a piece in England in a Leylandia hedge, and it looks like a solid form, but when you walk inside of these trees, there are these huge cathedral-like spaces in there. So those are the ones I capitalized on. I made a pathway that you could go through, and then I made these big stick rooms in there, and then these were skylights to those rooms. So that's kind of the way you got in, and even in further. And in Birmingham, Alabama, we made this piece that's about 50 feet up. Really, it's a roller coaster for squirrels. And I pulled the limbs from the two trees together and then woven across them. And when you get up on the third floor and you look out, you realize how huge these things are. And they just kind of gallop from tree to tree. And they did go through a major hurricane without being dislodged. This is a piece of, so not only have I worked with trees, sometimes I work with the overtones of trees. So this was a piece down in Savannah. It's a kind of an architectural folly that fits up underneath this tree, this live oak tree, and so it dropped a lot of Spanish moss on it, and getting you to kind of see these source limbs up through the dome. A piece in Hawaii at the Contemporary Art Museum there, using the trunk of this tree as kind of a model for how to build these pieces, and they're bookends, and they kind of go up and flow around in the top of the tree. Of this piece you saw before for the impromptu opening, this is in New Harmony, Indiana, and it was a hornbeam hedge, but it didn't have anything underneath it, so it gave me the idea of building a kind of a cave dwelling or some kind of dwelling that fit back up and underneath this head of hair. And then this was its winter configuration and kind of much more verticality. Really a popular piece. And this is a piece that uses trees as well. It's called trailheads, and they're about 35 feet tall, and each one of them the head is built into a crown of a cherry tree. And so I was told that I was going to have to take it down, and I had a cadre of mothers come out of the nearby the neighborhoods nearby, and they said, "If you touch that, we're going to tell the artist on you." I said, "I am the artist, and they're making me take this down." And sometimes I've had to just build pieces because I don't have any trees to work on. I have no buildings to work on. They just say, "This is all we've got, take it or leave it." And this was my earth-saving turtle in France. And so this is a turtle with the earth on its back. It's a very elaborate series of hallways that go into this inner core. This is the home that is a stately home that belongs to the French government, and the earth-saving turtle is located there. A piece in the Morris Arboretum in Philadelphia, and it started out as a snail shell from my garden. It went to a layer cake and then to a Japanese hairstyle, and finally ended up as the summer palace. So it's kind of billowing, and it's kind of got false pockets in there, and so it gave it this kind of beautiful shape. This is a new work this is a new work, and I put it at the exact same place. They had me come back 5 years later. This is called Waltz in the Woods. And so I built these little towers that seem to be kind of moving in place there, swaying in some way, maybe waltzing on the exact same footprint as I had the summer palace. It's always hard to follow yourself, I'll tell you that. This is a private commission that I built in North Carolina. It's just come down not too long ago. But what I liked about it was there's no wires or nails or screws or anything. This is just thoroughly sticks woven together. I sometimes have to do work that stands on its own inside of a building. This was in Brussels. It's called sleepwalking, and these huge pieces that are like 27 feet tall that inhabit this big gallery. A piece at Purdue, and I'm looking down from the top of the roof into this piece. It's made of willow, and those are some beautiful willow that they have there. And you know, in the Ohio Valley, they have a lot of serpent mounds, so this is my rendition of a serpent mound. They never look like serpents, they're just serpentine when you see them in dirt. So this is a kind of elaborate hallway. A piece at Bowdoin College. A lot of times I've learned to put elements together so the elements will support each other under heavy snow load. And so that was the case here. And the current work that's up in South Carolina, it's called Ain't Misbehaving. It's out in front of a performing arts center. There are 5 heads that look down 5 different streets that come together there. So each one of them look up. And the great thing about this, it inspired a tuba concert. And you won't believe it, but these tuba, a lot of tuba players, were teaching tuba in the schools around the city, and they all came over and decided to have a tuba concert in front of the noses. So it was a great day. This is a piece at the somewhere at the Museum of Glass, and this extended. I decided to use this pool to extend their reflection and the feeling of the work. And a piece at St. John's in Minnesota that just came down the other day, and it's called the Monk's Cradle. There are 5 little chapels leaning together, and this is the kind of way it looks from the backside. This was its winter configuration, which is most of the year. If you're from Minnesota, you know. And this is when it goes below 0. That's what it looks like when it looked like you put this thing in a deep freeze. So I really wanted to show you how many people would come to see a sculpture burn. And this is everybody in Scotland. And so they came that day. This was the piece. It was built after the Callanish Standing Stones. Sorry, I stood right in your way. The Callanish Standing Stones. This is the guy that brought me my scaffolding. And in Scotland, you have to scrap around to get your scaffolding out in the country, so you can see the scale of these big pieces. And this was that fateful day where they set the thing on fire, and the early aftermath in the morning. And can you believe these dancers are cooking their breakfast on my sculpture? This is my book, which they run out of in a bookstore. You can order it from Amazon or from my website if you want a signed copy. Or if before I leave tomorrow, if you have one in the boot of your car, bring it out there. So thank you very much. Questions, because I don't really know how I've lagged along.
Sure. Any questions?
Yeah.
Our daughter works for SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design, and in fact her office was in that gym. And I was curious when your piece, do you remember what year that piece was up there, or how long it stayed?
I know it stayed a really long time, and in fact I went down to visit it once and people had their cars underneath it, and I said I would not do that. So I can't remember. It was in the mid-90s, I think. Yeah.
How long do your sculptures usually last?
You get 2 good years in counting, and sometimes with a bit of maintenance, they're extended. We had a piece in a children's museum, Discovery Museum in Sausalito, right under the Golden Gate Bridge. They kept theirs for 7 years, but the kids have to use it every day, so every day they go out and look at it. So if, sometimes the dad will get up on top and call the whole family up there, and the sculptures don't last as long, if there's a lot of intense pressure on them. If there's somebody around to help maintain it, they look pretty good for a long time. But 2 years in counting, you want to take them down when they still look good, because the line between trash and treasure is very thin. Yeah.
Are there any other artists who work with natural things and do ephemeral works that you admire their work?
There's a lot of people actually that work with ephemeral materials. Some, with sod and leaves and a lot of things. There are more people starting to work with sticks as well. Not because they're in my legacy, but because it's available material and kids know about it, and there's just lots of upstarts in different places that think, hey, I could use sticks. And so, there's quite a manifestation. England has a big thing going on right now about living willow structures. So people can stick a stick down in the ground and it'll grow. And so for a lot of school systems, they've made domes and tunnels and various things that the kids use for kind of outdoor experiments. So if you're willing to put a willow in there and water it, it just grows immediately. You can do different things with it. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of volunteers helping you here?
We had quite a number of volunteers. I didn't mention it, but we had the inmates from a nearby prison who did a beautiful job. And we had a moment with them this afternoon. It was really great for them, really great for us. And I think we came to appreciate their plight. And, they trying to act normal for a few minutes is really good. And we hope that, that by working on this artwork and being taken serious a little bit, that maybe they had a change of state as well. We certainly did. And we had quite a number of students from the college, environmental class came out, and just some people that heard about us who came from various cities here and there. A few people flew from other parts of the country because they had family here and spent the day and worked with us. So we were really lucky to have so many great volunteers. Yeah, I'll get this one back here in a minute.
How do you choose your next project? How do you,
Well,
what's your process in determining?
I'm kind of an artist for hire, so people get me on the. They look at my work, see it somewhere. They contact me through the internet. We kind of decide whether it's going to work for them. I'll make a site visit eventually. It's kind of first come, first served. Sometimes I have to turn down a great opportunity because I, have people in mind, and so I'm booked through 2018 at the moment. I do 10 works a year, make site visits the rest of the other 2 months. And just, it takes 3 weeks to make a piece, I'm home off a week, and then I'm back on the road again. So it's a rollicking life in which, I have to have, my wife loves me, believe that or not. And she's a very tolerant person, and so we've had a great life together. And so she understands, her dad was a working artist, and she understands what it takes to make a living. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned 3 weeks, so since the beginning, have you done everything in a 3-week window?
That's right.
And are there any times when you're sort of running out of time and say, we've got to finish, or I can't do what I thought I wanted to do?
Well, somehow, you kind of bring a lot of disparate things together. One of the great things is that there's the potential to fail. So that keeps you on your toes. You can never know enough to get through one of these and have everything go perfectly. It's falling apart the whole time. I mean, we're out gathering materials, and then, as everyone knows who came with us, we went out more than one time and gathered because we didn't have enough materials. You don't know who's going to help you on a daily basis. Sometimes people walk up, but overall, you're crafting the thing, trying to problem solve, bring it together. You can work faster or slower. You get skilled at setting a project that you think you can do. You always overeat. You always want to make something that's really going to fit its space, because part of its success is based on the scale and how it seems to integrate itself in a site where it seems like, oh, it really belongs there. And we feel the same. I feel the same about this piece. There's a format in the front of the museum where there's a group of a number of different rectangles, the pools that move down, the segmentation of the sidewalk, some of the bushes, everything's kind of a series of rectangles. So we were kind of messing up the order of the day by taking rectangles and being reckless with them. Let them lean into the trees and bump into each other and lean on each other and so forth. And so, messing up the dignity of the tea party. But that's more fun. It's more fun for the viewer. So my obligation is to make something that's going to stir people up and excite their imagination and get them to come over and look at it. Yeah.
Just want to follow, how many different types of wood do you use, and have you ever run into a new wood of recent, as long as you've been doing this?
Well, I do always come up with different woods to use. Like, I'll say that won't work, and then I get there and I say, well, oh, this is fire cherry. It's not like a cherry I know, and it'll work, So Hawaii and tropical places are always the hardest because the wood dries out really quick. So there's plenty of Brazilian pepper here. But Brazilian pepper, you can cut it and you better use that stick right then or it's too dry. So we use crepe myrtle and a kind of, might be called Allen elm, something like that, an Allen elm. And they're ornamental that you have here. And Ben Oak Farms had a lot of things they lined out they can't use. The thing broke out the bottom of the pots and started being a life of their own. They're going to bulldoze them, so they said you could come and get them. Thanks to Cindy, she went out there and worked the thing out. So it was great, and we really appreciate their help in that. Yeah.
So with the sculptures here, do you encourage the kids to kind of touch and feel and?
Yeah, sometimes it drives museums crazy because we have a new piece up at the Renwick in Washington, D.C. It's a great show. The Renwick just opened, and the piece is beautiful, and it's a big interior space. Well, none of the other work in the show can you touch,
Right.
but you can go in and just don't jump through the windows too much. And so, of course, always they send you a picture. Palo Alto Art Center sent me, said, nobody is really misusing this piece. Then I go on the internet and I see a video, and kids are flying through the window. Like they just fell like Superman come through the window, roll and run back in, jump through the window again. So, all that is in try to be nice to it. Yeah.
Where do you go next?
I'm going to go, we're working in Gainesville, Georgia. The Atlanta Botanic Garden has been given a huge piece of land there and lots of money to build a new garden, and we're one of the leading edges of the new initiative. Then I'm going to Pippi Longstocking's home in Sweden to work in the garden. The author bought her childhood home and, in fact, of course, passed away. They've got a museum there, and so I get to work there next. Yeah.
Do you do a study of the woods in the area around if they're susceptible to lava, beetles, termites, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, to a degree. We're about to work at Holy Cross and also Tower Hill in Boston, and all these right now there's Asian longhorn beetle has infested everything, and green emerald ash. But one of the possibilities we wouldn't be able to take a stick from there and put it over here. But so we've been working with the foresters there to see how we can work with that situation and gather materials at one place and bring them to the college or bring them to Tower Hill where we can actually use them. So yeah.
So would you actually use repellents or something of that nature?
Well, generally outside it's not a big issue, but say at the Renwick, it was a total nightmare because we had to find a place that was big enough, like this room, to put all of these willows in and lower the temperature below zero for 2 weeks in order to kill all of the bugs. And then we had to fire retard them, and then we had to keep them in a freezer until we actually delivered them on site. They had to be under plastic. Nothing could from the outside air, so that we didn't bring bugs into the Renwick. So yeah, we're constantly working with this. Outside like this, even if a powder post beetle got in it, it's no real problem, because it's a temporary work and a little dust here or there doesn't make any difference. But when you have 12th century frames, a little bit different. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. I'll be